Hi, everybody. I want to thank you for joining today. We have the privilege to talk about our cannabis license REST API that's going to be used to validate business information, licenses, violations from multiple states. I'm joined today by Emmanuel Infante and Jacob Johnson. They're both VPs of the Ranty Cannabis Partner Network. They spearhead in terms of technology as well as connecting partners with each other for everything. So we're going to begin today and talk about the technology that we have built and that's being used out there to help with license verification processes. This webinar is being recorded and it will be available at a later date with everything. So a little bit about us, um, what we're going to do, who we are, why we're building it. We're then going to talk about the REST API itself, different use cases, and how the public and private sector can use it. We are joined today by some colleagues in a bunch of government fields, so we're happy for that, and we'll be touching upon how that can be used. And then really the next step as we move from preview into general availability. I'll try not to be that technical during this call because we know some are and some aren't developers within this webinar. So in terms of who we are and what we do, if you're a regular attendee to our webinars or you're a Ranty partner, you already know this. We provide solutions for financial institutions, tax authorities, governments, associations, and businesses along the compliance world. We do a lot in terms of, tracking payments, working with the Internal Revenue Service, and so on, and foreign tax authorities. And within there, we do a lot when it comes to professional services, such as consulting, and through our partner network, which are third-party businesses. Everybody is working together, whether it's in the cannabis world or on the side of it, are working together to address the issues that everybody from a government to a business perspective are facing. Our bread and butter is that we have been engaged with governments since about 2005, 2006, and we're strongly embedded in the compliance world, like myself being a lawyer and other team members being in the legal and the compliance fields. So we have to look at really the history of the API and what brought us here. Based upon, our surveys, we realize that, legal and compliance support is key, and the tools that have to go into there to ensure that, everything is possible and that they have the right and they have the right systems in place. We know that the policies out there are difficult to utilize. We know that they can be, time consuming to implement. So we wanted to make sure that the tech is there to support that. So as we work at, our developers, it's about compliance solutions for businesses and also for governments. We fall within, two different types. One is software code licensing, where you can actually license the full software code. And then the other is our REST APIs. These are cannabis controls. These are dealing with logins. These are dealing with our REST APIs and other services that are out there. So now we kind of get into the heart of this webinar. And this is really the company's informations and what information that we're pulling, the different states that we're pulling it from, and our roadmap. So here we have an example of our graph, the Ranty graph. This is displaying Colorado, for example, where we're able to pull, the license numbers and the company name, but also personal licenses and any violations that that company particularly has. So when that name or that license is searched, or a specific, personal license or whatever that it may be, you get the full record of that particular individual and that particular company, which is key when it comes time to compliance. And it works in a way that it starts, with the most broad, and it works down to the details. Now, when we get into the heart, we talk about REST APIs, and you're pulling the information known as the GET, and you're exposing that either in JSON or XML. If you're not a developer on this webinar, it's pretty basic code that will display this information, and you're able to manipulate it any way that you want in order to build it into any existing website, app, or software program that you have. The next is really dealing with multiple parameters. These are true and false conditions, adult versus medical, violations, and other ones that we'll talk about. And then the other issue is strict versus similar returns. What we have noticed from our study group is that if they don't type in the business name exactly, or else if there's a vendor who's getting approved or they're going through a license application process and they forget to include something, it may not return a result. So for us, it allows for strict and like or similar returns. So then filtering can be narrowed down to make sure that you got the right business. A prime example of that, if they always serves Acme Corporation, there might be different Acme corporations, but you have additional information that you would need from that particular state in order to make that decision. So we take a holistic approach to data gathering. We do medical and adult use. Some are combined, so some are separated. It really depends on the state that we're engaged with at the time. We have over 100,000 records, and that's usually a shock to people. But we store current and past records, personal license violation, city and county licenses, license types for multiple states. Even if a state doesn't have a historical database, we make our own because we get that information every single month. So if one state doesn't have it, we'll then categorize it as that particular month that it was given, and then going down from there. We make sure that at the end of the day, we have to engage with everybody on all different types of footings here. We do monthly updates for everything. We need to make sure that at the end of the day, we're able to, get the information that we need, and we have it made readily available. We crawl and manage different PDFs, CSV, XML files, text files, and other data sources, and is providing that on-demand service for the business and government. So what does this really then mean for everybody and everything? Well, for us, it means providing that on-demand verification service. And that's extremely important because at the end of the day, we have to make sure that we're providing all the services that they potentially need. And what we do here is we do it from holistic gathering data. We do it from the sense of the state, the county, and then the city. We want to make sure that we get all that information and all those feeds then are appropriate for us. The reason is that at the end of the day, you have to have the complete service for everything. So we work with individual states, and then from there, we work with individual counties and everybody else. We have to make sure that we get all these sources, together as one. So we'll work with the state of California, for example. We'll then work with each county and each city and combine them into two or into one. Now we're going to get into the actual REST API itself. What information are we actually getting? Well, if you look on the right, we're actually pulling the business information, the license numbers, and violations and/or complaints from these data sites. So in this example, we're getting the details of, I think that's Colorado, and we're pulling all that information from when it was issued to when it's expired, the email addresses, the licensee holders, and any violations that may or may not appear for that particular company or that particular individual. From that violation point, you're then able to see what code that they broke, the decision of the government, and why. And from here, we're looking at this as providing a single base record. So when you pull something on AMC cannabis control, you're pulling it on their entire file instead of going to different data sources and everywhere else. That is important because at the end of the day, we have to make sure that you have a complete history. And from here, you can see when that violation or that complaint happened, you can see why it happened and what year that it happened. So then you can make the ultimate decision as to whether you actually want to do business with them. Because maybe the violation was for an underage individual entering the store. For you, that might not be an issue because stuff happens. So from there, we're giving you the power about that particular organization. Now we get into the true false parameters. This varies between state, county, and even city of what they can do. But between all the APIs that we have, we're looking at it from a delivery type, medical versus recreational or adult use, hemp, and events. Here, we're pulling them back of saying, okay, the license type in this example is a recreational processor that is also a retail delivery, medical grade, and hemp. And as of 5/4/2018, when we pulled this record, you're now able to say, okay, they had that then, they have this now, so there's a continuation of that record without any hiccup. Or maybe they change and they got another license to become medical grade or lose their hemp, really depending upon what they want to do. Now, this is at the state level. If the city has certain parameters too outside the state, those are also shown. So within your own application and your own onboarding process, you're looking at this from, okay, I'm looking for businesses that have no violations, are delivery, and in recreational. Maybe that might be a new supplier for your firm, or it just needs to verify that that guy who is selling you something and say that he can deliver it is actually delivering it. Next is really the historical aspect that I touched on before in the past. This is key because you have to know about the business, and different states have different years of all their records. Some states that we have go back as far as 2013 on that particular business. So you're able to pull the entire history of that business and any personal licenses, any city licenses, and you're able to say, okay, as in the example below, there is 6/1/2018, which was pulled the other day, and then we have 5/27/2018. And we can see that both applications were withdrawn for the infused product manufacturer. And according to our records, there are no personal licenses or city licenses here. So based upon all that, is that you can get them from a monthly to an annual review. And that's important as you do your due diligence, as you're engaging in different vendors all the time, because what happens if a license lapses and they don't have the, and you don't know about that, but it can cause some type of liability on your end as you're dealing with them. Stuff does happen, and not to always play on the negative, we always have to make sure at the end of the day that, you have your bases covered. Next is really getting into the violations and complaints section. These vary from from state to state, and even if cities offer, their own violations and complaints as well too. But the basic information is dealing with the case number, the city number, and then dealing with the license number and the penalty type. Now, in certain states that we pull from, there's complaints and violations. So that complaint might be something that hasn't yielded a violation yet, but there is that particular audit trail of saying that this complaint for this business went nowhere or it turned into a violation, and I now get the full understanding of that particular business for everything. So it's very important that you take into account of, what violations do my vendors have, or even what violations do I have myself, and are they accurate? And we'll talk about updating that information and how to, file appeals and processes to ensure that if we pull information that you have been relieved of a violation or have changed something, but it hasn't reflected in the government side yet, on how that process goes about. Because this is, your data that builds upon, your business and your brand. So the other aspect of the API is a partner network. These are businesses that are partners with us, and they supply additional documentation to verify who they are. They upload their cannabis license, articles of incorp, and other type of documentation from that county, city, or state that's required. Therefore, if you're a partner and somebody is doing any type of back-end research, validating your information, you have the ability to upload supporting documentation based upon that file. So a good example is if you're in California, you have your license that you have to actively display on your premises. You can upload that. So if somebody is doing any due diligence, you're then able to see their particular record, and everything is kosher from this point here and out. And if that information is updated, it's updated by the person. That leads to the next point, that if there's information that is incorrect, we have a dispute process in which you can provide us the updated information. We then check with that city, that county, that state, we verify it, and we'll update it before the records update on our end, and usually create a second dialog box to that end user saying there is a dispute in progress, this is supporting documentation, we are working with that particular agency to fix it, and understand why it is. Mistakes do happen, but we want to make sure that there's a way for them to address those matters. So now that we talked about that aspect and what the API is able to do, we now talk about our Cannabis API Hub. This is a centralized source for all cannabis data that we have. In addition to our data, it also supports data from governments and from other third parties with their own APIs. They're able to integrate it. They're able to build their own APIs, feed data into the system, and then when it's fed into the system, they're then able to, individuals can pull that data too. As we work with different cities and counties, they'll have their own data set that they may upload, that then they'll want to merge with a larger set, but you only need that particular city or county data that you're then able to pull from directly. Or in your case, if you're a cannabis business, you're able to take our data and you're able to build your own API based upon your own business. So if you want to report sales, your strain, or any type of related cannabis information, you can. And then that API will be made readily available to our clients and to other government people. So if they need confirmation of any type of information, they have it readily available, which when I discuss our roadmap, you'll then have an understanding of how that would work and when we're rolling it out with different parties. But it's important to note that the API Hub will contain all cannabis data, from strains to RFID tags to chemical composition, all that type of matching based upon what people have told us is lacking in the industry. The other aspect of all this are validators. In certain systems, an EDI transfer is required, which is an electronic delivery interface, but it has to be verified between our different environments. So in other words, you might be submitting an XML or PDF to somebody. That has to be verified before it can be sent. This is the type of work that we do with foreign tax authorities and financial institutions when they're exchanging information, to make sure that the recipient is getting the data that they have. Or in another case, you need to validate information that you have in XML or in a PDF format. So for example, you might have an export of all the vendors that you deal with, or say your government and all the people that are requiring validation to get a license in your city or town, you can upload that export. And from there, we can tell you based upon the data sets you selected, are these numbers valid in rapid time instead of building something into your application. That's extremely unique because at the end of the day, you're queuing up that information for the validation and you're not worrying about building it into your app. Now we get into the fun part, the creativity that the business owner and the developer has with their application. So we're going to focus on the public sector, how public sectors are using this, and the private sector on how commercial cannabis organizations can use it for continuing due diligence of their own record keeping and even working with the state agencies as well too. And we focus on all states where commercial cannabis activities are legal. And we're also going into the states that require medical grade and dealing with physicians. So we're taking a very granular approach when it comes to that particular data. So when we look at this, we break it down into like two categories, and these are statewide, and then these are, everything that's in the state. This includes cities, towns, anybody who's participating, to the regional, national. Are you only looking for West Coast or the few on the East Coast? Or do you want the whole picture of any business or any person that might have a record registered with that particular state? A prime example of that is an investor who might have a non-resident license in Colorado, but also is a California citizen and is involved in a distribution, company within California. You might want the complete history to make sure all those licenses are active. You might then, if you find an inactive license, you might want to then contact them and say, hey, we came across this. Can you explain this and why this is key? It's not that you're calling the person out on it. You're making sure that at the end of the day, you have that information and it's more power, to you. So in terms of the public sector, sometimes some people view this as the boring sector, but we actually enjoy working with governments, is, exposing data and providing more data to end users, verification processes, discovery of the history, and then it encourages due diligence instead of just completing a PDF and mailing it in, because sometimes we see that governments are a little bit inefficient. So if you can validate it before that application is sent, then it provides the submitter with the notification that all the information has been validated. It represents what they're saying. They're signing it within DocuSign or another service, and then from there, when the government receives it, they know that that has passed all the checks that they have put in. Sometimes those checks might say, even if there's a mismatch in the name, we're still going to temporarily allow this submittal because it just requires additional due diligence. And then, they're approving a license. The biggest thing that could potentially come run amok is if a licensee was found in violation in a certain city, but then they're trying a license in another city, those cities might not be talking to them, which can cause a problem from time to time. So you're trying to get that full information. And because of the API, excuse me, you're able to really get that on demand. And you're really able to say, okay, let's use California, for example. Say you're a certain city and county, you're rolling out a license process because, you just put the emergency cannabis legislation together, you're approving people, you now need the back end to say, well, I can validate it by searching on the site, or I can just enter in their number, ping it right away, get their whole history, and then that application can move on to the next place. In an ideal world, through the data gathering that we've been doing with these different agencies, is that particular, say, Santa Ana in California, they can, every single county and city is participating that allows cannabis, and is putting all the records. So when it's time for renewal, It's a very simplistic process, and they don't have to always validate information constantly. And that, say, for example, they have to go back up to the state, that all their forms, all their designs of their building is all laid out, their permit is electronically available, and it's pushing everything upwards or even downwards. The next is for private sector. We break it down into two categories. This is really the know your customer phase and then the continuing due diligence phase. This is important to us because at the end of the day, we have to make sure that you are vetting your vendors. Who do you have working for you? Where are you getting this stuff delivered from? Maybe the state even might want to know, or the city might want to know who you're engaged with. Yes, there are privacy issues, extremely well aware of that. You're talking to, a lawyer here. I understand it. I get it. But you never know that that information might need to be shared during the license application process or the renewal process to make sure that you're working with legitimate vendors, whether they be distributors, labs, growers, etc. There's the issue of scheduling reviews of vendors on a rolling basis. One thing that we're applying to this industry from the banking world is that we're making sure that at the end of the day, you validate your vendors, because you don't want to be dealing with somebody who has an expired or revoked license. Ignorance is not an excuse of the law. So if all of a sudden you're dealing with somebody that comes up on the expired list or it's been revoked, what do you do? What action plans do you take? And I don't want to try to sound like an insurance guy and scare you into the worst case scenarios, but there has to be some type of CDD or continuing due diligence. You want their complete records. You want to know, if they have personal licenses, do they have city licenses? And if there's any issues, you can always request clarifications. You can send them an email and say, hey, this came up in your file. Can you please explain this or provide any supporting documentation? And then you go from there. That's very crucial, because at the end of the day, if a problem does happen and you're dealing with somebody whose license expired or has been revoked, it's a cascading effect that you might have with the city, the county, and even the state. So you mostly want to stay one step ahead. And if you've been coming to our other webinars, we have touched briefly on some best practices and really what to do. And since KYC and CDD, know your customer, continuing due diligence is key. And whether you're a government or you're in the private sector, you want to review them pretty regularly to make sure they don't have any violations. And if a violation does pop up, is your team okay with it? Are they okay with, okay, they let in an underage person to their store? Not a big deal. But if a license came up as saying, they were selling it on the black market, that might raise some flags on your end. So it's about creating those different triggers and those different procedures. The next then is really creating an audit history of reviews for your vendors. So you have all that information together. Vet your beneficial owners where you can. Some states have it, some states don't. But really have an understanding of, who they are, are their licenses valid if they are, and who are they? So that's extremely paramount, for your KYC and CDC. You can run these automatically against your database, against a Microsoft Excel, CSV file, an XML file, and even a PDF file. So that type of flexibility there gives you the ability to, you don't have to worry about development, but there are other tools that are made available to you. So now it's getting out into the next steps, licensing models, customized models, deployment methods, and all that. I'm not going to talk about price. It's irrelevant here for this type of webinar. This is about, pure education and how, stuff works. Our biggest thing is start preparing now. Put something into place so you can validate this information. a lot of the businesses that we're engaged with, they really don't have anything in place, which is, completely fine, but you need something there. If you're one of our partners, you get discounted rates. You don't have to worry about going over. We have different preview features that we roll out on a monthly on a monthly basis at times to test what people are using, how they want to improve it, and everything else. That's extremely, paramount for everything. And then once our partners let us know, we then, push that to general availability for our non-partners. So there's that benefit, inherent there. So for us, what's key, um, general availability is coming in July. We're in preview stage right now. Because of that, costs are a little bit lower. Everything's, rolling out. We're seeing how people are using it, and we're improving upon certain type of call parameters, type of information that they would want to see. We're also launching a form and knowledge base center too, so people can request new features. We queue those up, and then from there and everything, we're now putting together, our latest information. Begin system integrations now. We have training courses on our technology, how to be engaged with governments, and different type of certifications as well too. I recommend emailing cannabis at ranty.com to learn about enrollment before the July general availability, to kind of get your opinions, to tell us what you want. There's some other emails at the end of individuals, such as EJ and Jacob, that you can contact as well too. But we want to hear your voice. We want to know what's working, what's not working, and really to make your life a little bit easier from there. When we look at our roadmap is broken down into different systems based upon the state and based upon the what we're wanting to work with. So in the next 2 weeks, we're rolling out California, Nevada, and Alaska. Then we're rolling out Michigan, Montana, and Maryland, and then ending it with DC and Vermont, in terms of recreational and some medical that's required for it. From there, we're working with a bunch of cities and counties to get their information and make sure that that's properly embedded, so they have the whole picture. But those counties and cities are on a rolling basis, because some cities and counties don't have the technology. They're just getting their processes up and running, and they're ready, to get something out the door. So access to those may come at, later dates. We are releasing our XML validator along with PDF. So you can do XMLs and PDFs with everything and validate business names and business licenses. We're integrating with our FormSync, which is our interactive PDFs. People can fill out fields and you can validate that information right away in the PDF. And then once it passes your criteria, it protects that PDF so it can't be edited, and it provides a verification checklist. The other part that we're doing are events. We know that there's a lot of events that happen, whether it's in California or other states, and it's all about validating the licenses. Or if you're using our partner portal to do events, you're able to validate those licenses as well too. That's about a month to 2 months down the road. We're starting to integrate with Metric API. If you're in the cannabis business, you know who Metric is. We're engaged with them on a limited scale to ensure that you could put in your API tokens and your keys with them and really create that entire environment. We're currently scoping that out, so that will be more of a 4 to 5 month rollout, varying per state based upon what is required. The API Hub is coming out in a month to create your own and manage your own APIs, for governments to be more involved in that. And the last thing, which is really cool, which I like, is our web crawlers and our domain verifications. If you have a website, we want to verify you to make sure that you're legitimate, that's who you are. Um, Putting certain text files in your DNS to ping that and making sure that is who you are. The other thing that we're doing is we're crawling those particular sites. And then because we're crawling those sites, we're also crawling Twitter, Instagram, and others and feeding through the black market and getting a rundown of, well, they're selling this cannabis with this particular license number, but it's from this Instagram account. And, we're making sure that that's you and not somebody trying to utilize your license number, your name, or something else to get access, to those, those profits on the black market. That's about a year off that we're rolling that process out. So with all this being said, as we're nearing the end of our webinar, is definitely stay connected with us as a partner. Going to our tech events. We have some coming up in July in California, in San Jose, LA, and San Diego that we get into the real details of it. It's free for our partners, but there's a cost associated with it for non-partners. We get into the details of the API. Podcasts, webinars, tech events, and industry events. Follow up on that. Don't let technology fall to the wayside. Make sure that you have the right technology. We'll be bringing in some of our technology partners as well too, to make sure that you might be using products that you have from them, and if so, are you using them correctly? It's all about compliance for us. We also have Cannabis API webinars. These are for people that either have access to our API or their partners. These are best practices webinars that are hosted on a monthly basis. Some of the topics that we really touch upon, because states have different data sets and types, what happens if you work cross-border? If that's the case, how can you manage your code, whether it's JavaScript, C#, Java itself, whatever that you're building, what can you do to go through those data sets? Since you're dealing with state data, county data, and city data, how do you address those matters as well too? How are you filtering it properly? How are you getting the results that you need? What are the limitations of the data? This is a GET API, so you're getting this data from us. We do have a POST API for our partners and for disputes. So what can and can't you do for all of that? Properly using data and calls. There are situations in certain states where the city has comma LLC, but the state doesn't. So there's that mismatch. So how can you phrase your commands better to pull that data? And what happens if you forget that and you're not pulling it correctly? What can you do? And then how to deal from a state by state approach. You might want all the data in the world, which is great, but is it worth it? Are you overdoing it? And everything else. So from there, I want to conclude. I'll keep this slide up for a while as I sum everything up and really talking about, who we are and what we do and what our ultimate goal is. Our ultimate goal is to provide a national verification process that, as different states are rolling out cannabis regulations, there's different licenses, different verification processes, and we want to make it as easy as pie for everybody to get their information out there, have it verified, and know who they're doing business with. Because you never want to do business with somebody who has an expired or revoked or pending license, even if it's limited to a certain degree. We want to make sure that we achieve that. And insight is important. whether it's taking a quick survey, whether it's telling us what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong. If you're a government employee on this current webinar, is making sure that we understand what you collect and what you want to release and how you verify your information, because if we don't have the right tools at hand here. We want to make sure that we're building this for the businesses, and whether it's per state or through multiple states with everything. So I highly recommend that you reach out either to Jacob Johnson or EJ Infratante, either by email or phone. Have an understanding of what they do in the Cannabis Partner Network, the technology behind it, and if you're interested in using the technology, whether to build your own app or submitting data to us, I highly recommend that, simply because the more data, the better. We don't want to come across as Big Brother. We want to come across as the ability to verify information for your business. Preview is going to end at the end of this month. So if you want to ask suggestions, email either Jacob or EJ, sign up for the preview. If you're a government, let's get talking, because then we'll be able to be more engaged. But I want to thank you for attending today. We're finishing 15 minutes early, so hopefully you're able to have a quick break before your next appointment, and please keep in touch. Thank you.